talking about journeys, destinations, culture, adventure, gear, conservation, and all the things we haven't yet thought of. This episode is brought to you by Hiker, the 21st century portable outdoor oven that prepares your favourite food just the way you like it. Pizza with an irresistible crunchy crust, fluffy sponge cakes, rustic loaves of bread, authentic lasagna, and all of your favourite baked dishes. Cooked in a round oven made in Europe, you'll appreciate food just as it's made at home. All you need is a gas stove. Currently promoted on Kickstarter, visit hikeroven.com or the Kickstarter platform. As usual, you'll find the links in the description below. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm really excited today to welcome an incredible guest and friend, Dr. Kate Leeming. Kate isn't just an accomplished explorer, she's also a passionate advocate for sustainability and education. You might know her from her groundbreaking cycling expeditions across some of the toughest terrains on Earth. Think Russia, Antarctica, Africa, and of course Australia. What sets Kate apart, though, is her deep commitment to inspire the next generation. She uses her adventures to shine a light on critical environmental issues and to rally for urgent climate action. But there's more. Kate is also deeply invested in improving prospects for female education, especially in some of the poorest regions of the world. She actively supports initiatives that empower girls through education because she sees it as a vital way to enhance community well-being and promote sustainable development. So, join me as we dive into her incredible stories of exploration, including the ups and downs she's faced along the way. Plus, we'll lift the veil on her upcoming expedition into Central Asia, which has the thrilling promise of a world-first geographic discovery. Let's get started. Kate, I'm really glad to have you on board today. We've spoken several times about doing a podcast, and finally, here we are. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm looking forward to chatting with you over the next however long it's going to be, but I'm sort of 10 hours ahead of you in time, so it's just getting dark here now. It's sort of 8 o'clock at night. So yeah, looking forward to it. Good.
But I'll tell you what, let's start off with a little bit of background, because not everybody knows you yet. And just give me an idea, or give us an idea of how you got into cycling and some of the things you've been up to along your journey.
Well, I grew up in Western Australia, and I was an all-round sports person who used a bike for fun and to keep fit. And then I had the opportunity to travel to the UK first. And then, I was really always dreaming about, cycling through Italy or France. And that was, something that never seemed possible. But now the fact that I'd sort of come to the UK and I was with some friends and I just started cycling. I did a little cycle journey in Ireland. And then sort of little trips led to bigger trips. And I sort of did a big journey through France. And then that evolved into doing about 15,000 kilometres in total through Europe. It's kind of my personal kind of way of seeing Europe. There was nothing else other than personal exploration. And that's really where I discovered my passion for travelling by bike. And I guess the core reasons as to why I just really love to travel by bike. Firstly, it just gives just an incredible connection with the people in the land. And I just love this idea of bringing a line on a map to life. And it really gives just like a great sense of place and a realistic perspective of how the world fits together, or wherever I'm traveling, how that fits together. And then, so having sort of explored mostly the Mediterranean, and then I did a journey up to the Nordkap, actually, in Norway. And I sort of started to understand what I could do on a bike. And then I met Robert Swan, who's a polar explorer, first person to have walked to both the North and South Poles. And Robert sort of took me under his wing, and he really taught me that there's much more value to what I'm doing than simply riding a bike. So everything that I've ever done since the European journeys there's always been another reason to support the people and places that I travel through, to support education. And that kind of led on to really the first major expedition that I did, which was actually, I'm the first woman to have cycled across the whole of Russia back in 1993, just when everything was changing. And I chose to aid children affected by the Chernobyl disaster with that, which had only happened 7 years before that, making us feel pretty old. But that was just an incredible journey. And suddenly it all sort of changed, just from me being a sports person and enjoying Europe to actually being more of an explorer, where I've really sort of had lots of plans and reasons for what I was doing, and sort of took it all to another level, I'd say.
Right. You were mentioning there that you sort of like to involve, let's say, projects within your travels. This is under the umbrella of breaking the cycle.
Yeah. Okay. So breaking the cycle was a light bulb moment, I think, as a term I coined when I was sort of thinking about or planning my journey to cycle across Africa. So this was jump another expedition through Australia, and then I was planning to cycle basically from Africa's most westerly tip to its most easterly tip in a continuous line. But I was really wanting to understand more about sort of poverty in particular, and understand, the way it started was because I have a passion for the importance of education. And then when I started doing all the research, like I have to do for all of these expeditions, I realized that I couldn't just look at the importance of education because it was just interconnected with every other cause and effect of extreme poverty. So that's kind of was how that came together. And then when I was thinking about a name for the expedition, it came up as breaking the cycle, meaning a sort of a bit of a play on words between breaking the cycle of poverty and obviously what I'm doing, which was pretty hard in many different ways. So after that journey, I just decided, well, that seems like a pretty good term to keep. So I've kind of kept that as my kind of brand name as well. So breaking the cycle, just about every expedition now, whether it's breaking the cycle South Pole, breaking the cycle across Australia, breaking the cycle in Ladakh, and of course the new one that I'm planning, which will be breaking the cycle in Central Asia. So there's all these different breaking the cycles, and soon to be breaking the cycle foundation. That's what I'm also working.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Well, that's very good.
So that's kind of going to bring everything together, and I also have breaking the cycle education. So there's a few. Yeah.
There's one thing which you mentioned earlier on as well. Real tennis.
Oh yeah. Yep. So real tennis is, for those who don't know, it's the original game of tennis. It's kind of like the first racket sport that kind of evolved in Europe, mostly in France. But it was right through. Wasn't called real tennis in Germany. I think it was called Ballhaus. It was called Bella Corda in Italy. Had different names, but basically jeu de paume in France, and the French still call it jeu de paume. So it's about a 900-year-old game that started in the streets in France and Central Europe, and then just started by people playing with their hands and over a barrier and a cloth ball, and that evolved in monasteries. And then basically, if you look now at a real tennis court, it looks like a courtyard of a monastery, or it could be like a street, because that's kind of like its history. Mm-hmm. And the game evolved. So basically a glove on the hand, then a bat, then eventually a stringed racket about 550 years ago. And really the game, there's been a few innovations, but the game hasn't changed that much since. You still hit the ball over a net. The court looks like a courtyard. But of course, they're standardized these days in terms of size and all the different features on it. We like to think of it as a mix between tennis, squash, and chess. So it's at a top level. It's a very tough game and very physically demanding. But it can be played by people who are, anything from 9 till 90, really. Because there are a few extra rules that allow for that. And yeah, it's just this brilliant game that requires, your head as well as physical skills. And it's a very skill-orientated game. So I happened to discover this game when I was in the UK, working in a health club in London that had a court. And I had been a top-level squash player and a hockey player and a few other things. And I just picked this game up and got very passionate about that. Like after 2 years, I became a professional. And that was kind of, for the next 10 years, really, that was my adventure as well. Wow. So, but it's still my other job too. I still work as a real tennis professional, which is working in Melbourne here, which is kind of one of the busiest clubs in the world. And it's a wonderful game, and especially socially as well. There's about 10 to 12,000 people in the world that play, and it's like a big family, and it attracts all sorts of people. Lots of people have sort of a little bit different in one way or another, and most of them are quite smart. and that they come from all walks of life, and so it's a nice little world to be in, and to have that balance between that and what you all know me for in terms of as an explorer and adventurer. So yeah, that's how it all fits together.
Wow, that's quite something. So let's get back to cycling. Your last big expedition was crossing Australia from the easternmost to the westernmost point. And that was an expedition which was fraught with a few challenges along the way.
Certainly was. So that one actually started because we were locked down with COVID here. In Australia, we were locked in Australia for about 2 years. So I was thinking, I'd already done a 25,000 kilometre journey through Australia, really exploring my own country and the deserts and so on. But really, I devised this plan to cycle from Cape Byron, the most easterly tip, to Steep Point, the most westerly tip, but not in the usual way. It was actually a fat bike journey, and it was going to be going through the Simpson Desert and across the Great Victoria Desert and a little bit of the Little Sandy Desert as well. So it was going through these different deserts. Strzelecki Desert, there are lots of them in Australia. There was a bit of a time when it all seemed possible, and I managed to pull the sponsorship together and start off. I think it was on the 1st of May in 2021. And everything was going fine, crossed the north of New South Wales. And I was just coming through past Tibooburra and into the Strzelecki Desert. And going across there, it was just a little track that I was following. And there was some deep wheel ruts because you will know out in Australia, if it does rain, everything becomes stuck. And so there had been a lot of water around, and there were big, deep wheel ruts in the sort of clay pans. And I managed to get my wheel stuck, and I just broke my collarbone, something I'd never done before. I'd never broken any bones or maybe a rib slightly in Russia, but nothing stopped me. And this one, I just really badly broke my collarbone. So I had to stop and eventually had to come back to Melbourne, had the surgery. 8 weeks later, I was ready to restart, but then everything was locked down, and I had to keep my filmmaker sort of ready and keep him. It was so much stress involved because there was so much uncertainty. Eventually, it was apparent that then Western Australia totally closed its borders, and there was just zero chance of doing the expedition. So I had to put it on hold, and then 2 years later, so I also had another expedition on hold because of COVID. That was in the Andes. And so I finished that one first in 2022. And then 23, I came back to the point where I crashed, and I completed this journey, which in total was 8,600 kilometers. And there were more issues because there was lots of unseasonal rain, like absolute incredible flooding out in the Simpson Desert. It basically, the Eyre Creek, which runs down the east side of the Simpson Desert, was closed, and it wasn't going to open with the water. It was just still in massive flood. No vehicle or anything could get across till another more than a month. So I had to go right the way down to the south of South Australia to Port Augusta, and then all the way back up. And this journey was about adapting, I think. And I kind of managed to keep to time. And then there was a major vehicle breakdown with a support vehicle, and it couldn't be fixed out in Coober Pedy. So it got water in the something in the diff, I think, or whatever it was. It was water where there should have been oil, and it wasn't good. So they had to go all the way back to Melbourne to get parts and get it fixed because they didn't have any parts out there, and there were none in Australia apparently. So they had to be shipped from the US. So I was stuck in Coober Pedy with the cameraman who just joined me, and he just got there, and we were stuck in Coober Pedy for 3 weeks. So I did a little bit extra on the journey and added some more parts in, and then we set off again. And then I had to make up time as best I could and adapt the journey slightly. But it was really still an amazing journey, and coming through across the Anne Bedell Highway and then down to Junt Junt Jarrah, which is one of the country's most remote Aboriginal communities. I got permission to go in there and to learn. And I visited a few other communities as well, and to learn from them and to just basically try to hear their stories and what they want. And it was a nice balance. It still finished just in time I think it was the 19th of September in 2023. So that's a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you had that accident and actually broke a collarbone, I mean, the one thing you didn't mention was the fact that you were actually completely alone at the time, and you still had to travel X kilometers to reach your support team.
Yeah, I didn't know where they were. They'd gone ahead because the filmmaker was wanting to take some shots, and I don't have them next to me all the time. So they'd gone ahead, and I didn't know where they were. I hadn't quite worked out what I'd done. I just was in total shock and went to pick the bike up, and this is a big grinding, crunching, so I couldn't really use my right arm. And then I sort of had a 5-minute break, and then I thought, well, I might as well see where they are. So I started pushing, and then I realized actually it's a fat bike. It's a pretty comfortable bike. If I just sort of rest my hand on the handlebar and just pedal gently, which I did for about 4 kilometers before I found them. It wasn't huge, but still, it was quite treacherous conditions in the end because there was lots of flooding, as I mentioned, and there were no stable surfaces. So it was. I guess they would have eventually come back and found me, but I went and found them.
Not a good scenario. The other thing about Australia is you have a lot of animals which are out to get you. You have lots of poisonous creatures. Is that a problem when you're traveling alone?
Certainly, especially out in the desert. I mean, the reason the snakes are so venomous are because they have to make a kill because there isn't much out there. So that's what I think anyway. So surprisingly, I didn't see any snakes. I saw their tracks. But in the past, like in the Canning Stock route, I saw 3 king browns in 2 days, and I'm cycling along 2-wheel tracks with high grass either side. So it's like, I don't want to surprise one of those.
No.
So that is one. Yeah, I am quite afraid of snakes. So we always kept a lookout. Then there are other things, weird things like, lots of camels out there, and you don't want to come across a male camel on heat. I have done that before where I just had to hide. They are really dangerous. So that I didn't have any confrontations this time, but I have had that before or seen that before, and they're pretty dangerous. I mean, the other thing is just not getting lost. We nearly lost our cameraman. He got a real shock. So there's just the first break after leaving Junt Jarrah, and we just stop on the side of the road. And the bush is very easy to get disorientated once you're away from a track. And he just went off for a little wander just away from the camp and got totally disorientated. And we lost him. And I lost about an hour and a half. We were really worried, and we're sending the drone up to look for him and driving and calling and trying not to get lost ourselves. Eventually, one of the support drivers found him, but so that's another thing. It's very easy, to get lost. This was a supported journey, whereas before my other journey wasn't. So carrying enough water is usually a massive issue out there, and knowing where your next lot of water is coming from. This time, sometimes I was running low on water, but at least we had that sort of plan sorted out.
Yeah. Wow. I tell you what, before we move on to the next expedition, which is sort of on the horizon, I'd like you to explain a little bit about your amazing fat bike, the Christini model.
So it was kind of my idea. So I'm also planning to cycle across Antarctica via the South Pole. It's been on the cards for about a decade now, and the most difficult thing is finding the funding. But when I was originally thinking about cycling, I was trying to work out what the best kind of bike would be. Obviously, it has to be a fat bike, so as wide as tires as possible. Flotation is key over soft surfaces. And then I was sort of interacting mostly with a bike maker up in North America. And eventually I met this guy, Steve Christini, who had made an all-wheel drive system with kind of built into the frame. And it was the only system that looked like it might be robust enough for what I do and what I wanted it for in Antarctica. And I contacted him, and basically he'd only ever made this system in a normal mountain bike before, and he'd gone on to making all-wheel drive motorbikes. But I managed to convince him. He loved this idea of potentially making a bike that'll be ridden across Antarctica. And so he made the first prototype, which I tested up in Svalbard. That was my first experience of the extreme cold. It got down to about minus 30 C there. And I'd come straight out of an Australian summer, so it was a bit tricky. In fact, all of my polar expeditions have come out of an Australian summer pretty much. So that makes it doubly hard for me. So that bike was good, but it could have been improved a bit. So then he made a second one, which was trialled in northeast Greenland, fat bike number 2. That had the 4.8-inch wide tyres. It was the first one of its type. So the first one, there were 2 different types of frames. So this was the first one of its type. And that was a good bike. I really liked that bike. That bike since has become my sand bike. So that's the one I've used recently across Australia. It's been down in Namibia, down the Skeleton Coast. And it's also done another journey in Australia down the Finke River. So it's just sand. And so that was number 2. Number 3 was trialled in Arctic Canada. And number 4 was trialled in Iceland first, and then recently actually in Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. I did this very cool little expedition down there early last year, and that was amazing. A little route that had never been done before, working with White Desert, which is a luxury adventure travel company, but at the end of their season they had some resources, and we just had this agreement that they would support this journey. So it was 200 kilometers from one camp to another, and it was an amazing little journey. So that bike, that number 4, is like the Rolls Royce. It's the one I'll use across Antarctica, and I'm saving it for that. And the number 2 is really the one that I've been using in sort of sand type expeditions. And then I have another one that I've used in the Andes. That's a mountain bike. It's a sort of a plus size mountain bike with 3-inch wide tires. And I'll use that in the expedition coming up for anywhere where there's sand. I mean, the reason that the all-wheel drive is it's not magic, but it actually gives me a little bit of extra grip, and it's amazingly efficient. Like I can keep it switched off until I need it, and even when I switch it on, it doesn't. I don't have to power it all the times. Immediately when the front wheel slips or the back wheel decelerates, it immediately engages, and that gives the extra grip. So it's not really much of a risk to have it, as it sounds very complex, but it can be switched off, and it's not harder. It's amazing, actually. And it doesn't weigh. It weighs I think it's 2 pounds or less than. I forgot what it weighs. It's 2 pounds, I think it is, or just under. So it's kind of, it's a no-brainer. It's a kilo extra, so it's not much difference for a bike. I'm not going for super light bikes for this anyway. It's a great little innovation.
Brilliant. And as you say, you can switch it on the fly. Yeah,
I mean, the Australian journey, I didn't really need a fat bike for most of it. But, I was catering for the worst of the conditions I was going to get. It was not really much fun still having to ride it on tarmac roads or good gravel. I pumped the tyres up, and actually you only use a little bit of the tyre, but there's still more wind resistance. It is much more nimble than people give it credit for, but still I'd prefer a faster bike if I'm doing big distances over tarmac or good gravel. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Your recent trip to Antarctica, you've also released a video about that, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I've just made it. It just finished last week. So I'm going to release it. I would like to put it into some film festivals. It's a bit of it's only made from just my action cameras. So just 3 different action cameras. So it's not sort of no filmmaker with me or anything. So it's a bit rough and ready, but it's a very good, gritty little story, I think. And, we put the effort in because I think it's a story worth telling, just what it's actually like on the different surfaces and the different conditions that I faced over those 5 days. And as I said, no one's ever done it before. So it's a great little record of that. So I'm hoping to get that into, say, a couple of different film festivals. But with the other journeys that have been, more seriously filmed with professional camera operators and me, they require a little bit more in terms of investment and that kind of thing. So they're a bit harder work.
Well, I'll put some links of a couple of videos in the description below, as they like to say here. Right. Well, I tell you what, now you've got, for me, also a very exciting expedition on the horizon.
Breaking the cycle, Central Asia. So Central Asia has been on my radar for a long time, probably since my Russian expedition, because I stayed just within Russia, and that was just at the time that the Soviet Union was breaking up. And I always was intrigued by the idea of the Silk Route, and realized that with the Russian expedition, I was going along a certain latitude, and just a few hundred kilometers south of there, I would have been following the line of the Silk Route. And then, but Central Asia in particular, because obviously it was part of the Soviet Union, then it broke up. There were 5 different countries suddenly, and I was always very aware of the Aral Sea. Even as a kid growing up, I knew that it was the world's 4th largest lake, and I was sort of near the Caspian Sea. And then I also had learnt that there were quite a few issues regarding over use of water for cotton production. I already knew that from when I crossed Russia. So it's kind of like I was aware of this zone. And so it's been on my radar. I was trying to think how could I best tell this story? And it sort of came up with a light bulb moment of basically exploring the whole Aral Sea basin. So the idea, there are 2 majestic and major rivers that flow, that feed or used to feed the Aral Sea, the Syrdarya and the Amudarya, that in history are really important because some of the earliest civilizations were forged on the beside using the water from those rivers. So my idea is to start with the Syrdarya and start at the source of the Naran River, which is the main tributary up in the Tian Shan, and essentially follow the river and exploring the environs all the way down through the Fergana Valley and all the way down to the Aral Sea, and sort of setting up a whole lot of stories and in and around the Aral Sea, and cycling over the dry seabed and meeting different people, and then basically cycling all the way back up the Amudarya, which in history is known as the Oxus River, all the way back up to its source. And actually sources is more correct, because the Oxus River itself has quite a sort of an interesting point in history. So the source itself, the sources are in the Wakhan corridor in Afghanistan, sort of just between the sort of running off the Pamirs and the Hindu Kush. And there are a few different tributaries. There are 2 longer tributaries that probably should be where the source is. But back in the 1800s, when the source of the Oxus was meant to be the demarcation point between the Russian and the British imperial empires. And so that sort of back in the 1830s, fellow Lieutenant Wood was sent out to explore, to find the source of the Oxus River. And he found a lake. He named it Lake Victoria, of course, because that was the time. But it's now called Lake Zorkel, and it's the head of the Pamir River, which is one of the sources of the Oxus, but it's not the longest tributary. Then in 1895, Lord Curzon, who was the president of the Royal Geographical Society, and he led an expedition out there and discovered an ice cave at the head of one of the longest tributaries. And so he came back saying he'd discovered the source, and it was this ice cave. And for a long, long time, that's what they thought the source was. And then a friend that I have actually through the real tennis world, who's an explorer, Bill Colgrave, and he went out there. I knew he went out there in 2007, and he went to explore and just have a look at the ice cave and measure it to see if it's the same dimensions and that kind of thing. And then he also discovered that actually the true source is probably not that. There's a little stream that basically runs off the Pamirs, off the Nicholas Range, and it runs into a lake, Chakmaktin Lake, which is basically the source of the other longest tributary, without explaining all the names. And so this little stream that runs off basically bifurcates, and half of it flows into the lake, and the other half flows into the other longest source. Surely the head of that stream, which is called the Chelub stream, must be the true source of the Oxus River, which has never... I thought Bill had gone and flagged it, but he'd only been to where it bifurcates. So actually there's an opportunity there to actually climb up there. It looks like it's about 5,000 meters elevation, and we'll see if we can... identify the true source of the Oxus River after all these centuries. So that's very exciting. It's sort of icing on the cake, really. I'm looking to tell a story about water, the importance of water, the management and mismanagement, and then really try to also create a story of hope, because although there's some really alarming things that are happening, there's also, especially with the Aral Sea North, it's kind of been partially saved by the Kazakhstan government and the World Bank. So it's kind of like, just really exploring. And I think this part of the world, which a lot of people don't really know much about, is really important. And that story should be really important, because this is like ground zero. This is what happens when you don't look after your environment, especially if you don't look after your water resources. So we need to learn from it. And that's another good reason for telling this story. And that's why I've got like education programs being set up, trying to make a documentary. We will make a documentary series. We've got quotes for a 4 times 60-minute documentary series, and then raising funds for water.org, which is, they do some really great work around the world, supporting especially developing countries, and a lot in Africa and India, but still they do great stuff. And I think they're worthy of raising funds for them. The charity itself was co-founded by Matt Damon, and they do great work. I think they've so far helped about 73 million people with what they do. So I'll get on the bandwagon too and support them.
That's an incredible project. I mean, it's far-reaching, to say the least.
It kept growing from this simple idea of following the rivers to sea to source, but then it's not so easy to make it happen, because there's lots of different country borders, and those countries don't all get on. And then to have support drivers to carry the filmmakers and so on, it's complex, because some drivers can't drive in other countries. So I can't just have one driver for the whole lot. I've got to have different drivers, and it's pretty tricky, but it's going to be worth it.
That's brilliant. I mean, it's going to be, if you can find the source, well, that would be a world first, that's for sure.
Yeah.
How far or how long do you anticipate this expedition being, and how much time do you need for it?
So that was sort of between 4.5 and 5 months. Depends how many extra little bits I add on. But I initially said 4.5, might be closer to 5, because of the complexities, actually, not my cycling, the complexities. So it looks to be 10,500 kilometers, maybe pushing up to closer to 11 if I get to do all of the different stages. It's big.
It is big.
I think it's a bit of an epic, but I don't know. I love the epicness of it, and the fact that this was part of it was a well-trodden path, for millennia. Marco Polo went through there. All these different very famous explorers all went through there. I think Marco Polo probably went through past the source of the Oxus there, and up into the Wakjia Pass, which goes into China there. So there's a small boundary with China between that and Afghanistan. So, there's just so much history there, as well as this sort of contemporary story that I think is pretty important.
Incredible. You're saying that sort of there are challenges for or involved in this expedition. As you say, you can't use the same driver because they won't be able to travel in different countries, etc. How is the planning procedure for such an epic expedition?
Look, the organisation and planning is probably the hardest thing I do in any expedition, this one in particular. So I guess the way it works is I get the idea, I research like mad and try to work out what's the best to do. And then once I've got the general shape of the plan, then I had to work out what was practical. So firstly, I found some contacts in the Wakhan corridor in Afghanistan, and thanks to WhatsApp, I can actually speak to him. And so that was all fine. So I firstly checked that, because I thought that potentially could have been one of the sticking points. So that's, in fact, I was in touch with him today. And then after that, he put me in touch with a driver from Tajikistan that he works with. And I had a chat with Alisho, and he seemed like a very good bloke. And then he suggested I contact, strangely enough, a travel agent who works out of Melbourne, where I am now. So This fellow specializes in Central Asia and has all sorts of contacts. So he's sort of agreed to help coordinate and introduce me to different drivers and different people who can help me with the logistics. So I've been busily connecting with all of those, and just there's lots of things about Turkmenistan for one is the trickiest country of all to get into. And I've been working with a local travel agent, as you have to by law in Turkmenistan. Fingers crossed that the visas that we're going to apply for, we can't apply for them yet. They accept those. And even there, I had to divide my section in Turkmenistan. I've had to divide into two-week sections because you're not going to get permission to do more than 2 weeks at a time. So there's all those things. And there's only two land borders open into Turkmenistan as well. So all these plans I had, and then I realized actually half of these borders are not even open. So I've had to change things around a little bit. So that's just the logistics. But then there's the fundraising and the, yes, I'm cycling, but I'm negotiating. I've got different partners for an education program and a system that we think is going to work really well. And then, raising funds for water.org. And then on top of that, filmmaking, I've got a production company who's based in London and, they can't do it for nothing. So, it's very tricky. And then obviously I've got to find the funding. Now I can find kit and, products fairly easily. And I've got a lot myself already. So finding the funds, though, is just the hardest thing I have to do probably. And it's not a great time to do that. And, you think after all of this experience that I've had for so many years that this would get easier, but it just doesn't seem to. The expedition costs so much, but then double that to have a filmmaker and then go and add another 100,000 to make the TV series as well. And this is just big money, and that's US dollars, and the Australian dollar is not worth much at the moment. So, I'm trying to navigate all of that, and I'm just got so many balls in the air. I'm just hoping I can land them. Otherwise, I can't do it. So, and it's got to be timed with the seasons. I can't just do this any time of the year because obviously in the mountains up in the Tian Shan and the Pamirs and the Hindu Kush, the passes are only open in summer. So not until July, but I can't do the whole expedition at that time. So I have to start in the Fergana Valley, which is lower down, on the 22nd of March, which is World Water Day, and then do that, all of the deserts during that time before it gets extremely hot. And I will get some heat, but I'm better at handling heat than many, I would think. And then up into the mountains, and then I have to sort of go back and do the Narran River sort of in July when the passes are open. So it makes it a little disjointed, but there's just no other way to do it. It's very complex. Every day, this is what people don't see. They see these sort of expeditions and they get inspired by them and entertained by them. And they learn hopefully a little bit from them. But it's all of this that has to happen first, just to navigate away and find out more things. And some of the paths I'll be taking are well known and others are not. And there'll be lots of 4-wheel drive tracks and things through the Aral Sea, that kind of thing, where I'll need my Christini all-wheel drive mountain bike to go with. This time I've been very lucky in that Envy Composites is providing me with a fast gravel bike called a MOG. It's going to be beautiful when it comes, and I'm going to enjoy riding that on the faster surfaces.
It's challenging. It's challenging yes. Indeed. As you said, Turkmenistan, you can only be there for 2 weeks at a stretch. The visa is valid for 2 weeks. So that actually means you're going to have to ride to a point, pack up, probably, drive out, fly out, and then go back again. So is there also a limit between the 2 week visas? Do you have to be out of the country for like 10 days or something?
Well, I asked the travel agent that, and he said it's just got to be a clear gap. But there's sort of kind of two parts to my journey in Turkmenistan. And the most important bit is to make sure I follow the Amudarya, the Oxus River, because that's obviously the crux of the story. And the other part is kind of like an add-on that is non-essential, but it's a really cool story. So what I'm going to do is the part that's really essential for the expedition, following basically from the delta of the Oxus River, just before it goes into, or used to go into, the Aral Sea, and follow that river all the way up as far as I can. In fact, as far as where the Karakum Canal comes in, and that actually removes at least 25% of the water of the river all in one hit. And I'd like to sort of see that. So it's right on the corner there with Afghanistan. Yeah, it's a very tricky little corner. And then basically, so I'm going to follow it up as far as I can. And then I have this other, it is not essential, but a really cool story that basically follows the Karakum Canal as far as Meri and Merv, the ancient city of Merv. There's a new UNESCO World Heritage listing in 2023 called the Karakum Zerafshan Corridor, and it starts from Merv and it basically crosses the desert out through Turkmenabat, which is one of the two open land borders, and then it basically follows the Zerafshan River, which is a major tributary of the Oxus, all the way to Bukhara and Samarkand, and then up into a little bit into Tajikistan along the Zerafshan River. So I'm going to follow that as kind of a theme. So back to Turkmenistan, I have to do that. Then I'm out. Then I continue my journey. And then later in the journey, once I've finished the Pamirs bit, if I'm allowed, I'll come back and do this other bit. Now, this other bit is really cool. So the Oxus River, it's easier to say Oxus than Amu Darya, but it's changed its course many times through history because it's a very huge volume and the water moves very, very fast out of the mountains. And so there's been lots of silting and changing of direction, and it hasn't always flowed into the Aral Sea, or not all of it has always flowed into the Aral Sea. It's divided, and part of it flowed out to the Caspian Sea through this river called the Uzboy. And that river had been a really important part of some ancient civilizations. And I think the last time it had water in it or was flowing was maybe in roughly the 1500s or the 1600s, something like that. And, there is some artwork and some evidence of not that long ago. And anyway, there's this river channel that just, winds around like a cut snake sort of thing. And there's some ancient civilizations that, it supported a lot of people in its time. And I think it's a really cool story and that no one really knows about. The second part of that is that the current and previous Turkmenistan regime had decided that they would make a lake in the middle of the desert there, sort of using the Uzboy as part of the channel, like it's the channel of the Uzboy, to actually collect water off the runoff from the cotton fields, etc., which are obviously full of fertilizer and pesticides, and you name it, and taking some of that water of the Amudarya and making this huge lake out of a depression, which is about 100 kilometers long. It's a very long depression, and it hasn't really worked so far. But I'd love to kind of follow that and to see what's going on, and just the audacity to think you can build, these canals, which are all leaking water anyway, and most of it doesn't get to where it needs to go, and then finally fill up this massive lake to then irrigate more desert. And yet you've got the Amudarya that's died or dying, and it's just kind of crazy. So anyway, that's the story that I don't know whether I get to tell or not, but it's a good story, and I'd love to be able to follow it. And I have to do them a little faster than I was hoping to have a little bit of space around these things. But initially I was hoping to do a 37-day journey in total through Turkmenistan, but now it's 2 times 14 days. So that's what it is. I just have to embrace it and get it done. As long as I get the essential bit done, we're good. And if I don't get permission to go along the river, I'll have to find a way to go on the Uzbekistan side, but it's not so good there. It's just like there's maybe some little tiny tracks that follow most of it. But all the civilization and the main river is actually on the Turkmenistan side, so I prefer to follow that.
I think it's fair to say that part of your preparation is obviously an awful lot of research about obviously the route, but also the history, etc. So how does the educational side of it fit in? What are the goals there?
Well, I've worked previously with this a Canadian education outfit called Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And basically what they do is they do live presentations with scientists, conservationists, and explorers. And so maybe up to 6 classes might book a spot to listen, to be present or virtually present with those presentations. And then they, stream it live on YouTube, and then they record it. And they also do different events and things. But what we're going to be doing is, yes, I'll do about 4 presentations, but then I'm going to do regular updates every 1 to 2 weeks on the journey, where I record a little chat, send a whole lot of images, and they'll put together a little package. So there'll be these regular updates. And then on top of that, we're creating a story map, which is like a whole lot of resources that will back everything up, where they can kind of go and learn a little bit more about those things. That's something else I have to do, is research all the information for the story map. And then I have another company that does a 060 that creates these beautiful interactive maps. Everything can be placed on that map as well. So that's sort of kind of the crux of it. And there'll be bits about water, the importance of water. There'll be a activities section as well, and taking action and what they can do. And then they'll be learning also about, the Silk Route and different civilizations and different problems, like when there's been a dam collapse. There's been a couple of those that I'll be coming across. So there's all these things that hopefully they'll discover and sort of follow the journey, come along for the ride with me in certain ways. And they can pick up on the story at any time. So that's kind of the education side. And then I've got the Royal Geographical Society also have picked up on it. So they will promote it and try to get British schools involved. And I've got Australian schools. So I've got the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award here in Australia that I'm an honorary advisor for. So we've been discussing how we'll get these resources out to young people around the country here. So there's all these sort of little networks, and not every single one of them will probably work, but as long as I have the base and we keep the information coming, that'll probably, all of those resources, those updates especially, are going to be really good, not just for the kids, but actually everybody. So if we can keep those coming, as well as my blogs, which are, as you know, are pretty detailed. Yes. So between that, we'll have a lot of information that we can put out around the world. And then also working with water.org, who are also sort of going to do a little social media campaign, and they're pretty well connected too. So between us all, I can only do so much. If I'm writing, 6 to 8 hours a day, hopefully not too many 8 hours, I've got to maintain everything.
That's an amazing network as well. I mean, as you say, you've got water.org involved and the educational side. I think there have been, in the area which you're going into, so many man-made catastrophes which people aren't aware of. And you being able to tie in education now, I think it's going to open up an awful lot of eyes along the way. Yeah,
I hope so. I mean, before I do anything, I have to really believe in the story. And that took a long time. It always takes quite a while before I even start moving on the organisation of it. Because if I don't have the energy to push it from the start, then no one else does. And I've got to be able to have it to a point where I can sell it to people so that they then buy into it. And then that grows and grows. So that's kind of how it works.
All right, well, let's pick up on that then directly. If you're now under a sort of a time constraint, so what are the deadlines? What are the deadlines which you have to face next for, amongst others, funding and other steps of the preparation?
Well, it's really the major funding. I mean, I don't think in any of my expeditions the funding's actually come till quite close to the time, which is just, it gives me palpitations. I'm so stressed. But I'm just hoping to land some of these. So, I just have to get it done. Next month, I just have to land the money. I mean, this month I have to land the money, really. Because I'm spending all my nights and days trying to connect with people, trying to find a path through to get that money. I would love the day when I could just go out and prepare like you think I should be preparing for one of these things. It's all just office work. It's all just meeting people and trying to get their attentions and trying to explain why it's good for them to get involved. And when you ask for deadlines, I'd love it to be by the end of this month that I had some major contribution. And then I've just got to once you get a major contribution, the rest often follows around it. And I've got probably 4 opportunities right now that I'm just sort of trying to and hoping that one of them will at least come good. I'm networking like mad, trying to, and it's not that this is a last minute thing. I've been doing this for months, and the money doesn't come. They don't, and then Christmas gets in the way, and suddenly it's like, yeah, it's the middle of January already, and this is like serious. So it's already been 8 months' work, and it'll be more than that, obviously, by the time I go. Yeah, it's I've got a job as well, and luckily it's very flexible, but I finally get to the point where I tell them this is when I'm going to be away, and then it doesn't look good if I don't find the money. It's like, then they have to make space for me, and it costs me a lot of money personally. So that's what it is. I don't know any other way to make these things happen. I just have to hold tight and keep working and trust that it's going to work, as well as trying to steer it as best I can, and with the help of others.
You were saying there that this is all enormously time consuming and you're sort of tied to your desk. How much time in advance do you have to go into physical preparation for a journey like this, and what is involved?
Luckily, I have good muscle memory from previous expeditions. I always keep fit, as in, like just before I spoke to you, I did an hour on the bike and with my heart rate at 145, 150. So it's good training. I can't ride for 8 hours a day. I don't have time to do long rides. On my Christmas break, I actually did get out quite a lot and did ride up to 80 kilometers or whatever. I can do it. I just got to make sure that the legs are ready, that my body's healthy. And then I pretty much have to get fit as I go and I bite the bullet. And the first 10 days is just particularly hard. I guess one of my skills is that I'm quite good at understanding the intensity of my ride and try to work within a threshold that I can feel that's okay, that I can repeat that day after day. I don't sort of blow out on the first day. I mean, I do exercise intensely, and my work rate, I mean, I'm at work, it's also an active job, but I haven't done a long ride. I haven't had a time to do that. So I just get myself as ready as I can. And then the last weeks, usually you can't train. There's too much happening. It's a long journey. I think it's harder if it was the shorter journeys where I'm not quite up to speed at the start, then it's like you don't have time to really get into it. But this is 5 months. The first bit is not the mountains. It'll be flatter lands, and there'll be a reasonable road for most of that. So I can just get a bit of rhythm and try and use it that way, and then enjoy riding and enjoy where I am. I get very motivated because I'm seeing new things and experiencing new things every single day. But the discipline is to make sure I record everything properly, and fronting the camera, I've got to be able to make sense as well. And then you're meeting new people, and maybe I have to do an interview somewhere, and I've just been cycling for 7 hours, and I've got to sort of front up to do something. So there's lots of different stresses. It's quite different from just, I don't know, traveling for yourself. And this time I've got to present it. I've got to keep this information coming. I've got to, and it just takes a whole lot of different skills.
I'm sure. I think one of the nice things about it, though, and it's what you said at the very beginning, that doing an expedition or undertaking an expedition like this on a bicycle means you do have, you're very close to the people you're traveling past. And that gives you certainly more immersion than like traveling in a 4x4 or a truck. So I think this is an amazing project. I'm certainly looking forward to following it every day. And I know you still have several hurdles which you have to overcome before you start. And I think that's part of, this podcast as well, that we can put it in front of an audience who maybe somebody in there can also help.
Yeah.
Because I think, yes, I understand that you need a sizable chunk of support to be able to tick the box and say, right, it's going to happen. But I think also for maybe smaller businesses who want to get involved, I shall put your contact details in the description, and hopefully we can pull something together.
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic, because, I mean, it doesn't have to be, the largest sum, but just anything will help actually right now. So, imagine if 10 people decided that they would like to support that when they listen to this, and they put their hands in their pockets, or smaller businesses. There's quite a lot we can do for promotion.
Yeah.
So whether it's social media, I mean, that's the easy part. it could be acknowledgement in the documentary series. And I mean, my last documentary series was seen by more than 25 million people worldwide, and now it's streaming again. So I think it's had 11 or 12,000 views in as many days, and hopefully it'll have a whole lot more soon.
Brilliant.
Lots of things.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's draw today to a close. I think we should plan another episode either just before you leave or just after you start. I know you're not going to want to do that because you're going to have your head full of other stuff. And if you've been cycling 6 hours during the day, it might be a bit tight.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can do that, but we'll work it out. I don't know how it'll work out yet, but we'll work it out.
Brilliant. Kate, well, thank you very much for today. It's been a wonderful talk, loads of information and very, very exciting.
Thanks for having me, Mike. And it's just like, I don't know if I've rambled on too much, but there's so much to talk about, isn't there? So hopefully people will understand a little bit more about what it's all about.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to the At Overland Europe podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and download our app for more adventures and exclusive content. Remember, you can find our guest social media and websites linked in the description below. Until next time, safe travels.